Now I got it.
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
Nice
morning.
to see you again. This is Kathy Palmer coming to you from WCPC, Westfield Community Programming, where we broadcast every second,
Right.
every third Tuesday of the month at 8 o'clock in the morning, where we talk about history happens in Westfield, as it does indeed. Peter, anything you want to share with us? Peter is our producer. He is also the head of almost everything that has to happen and be broadcast in the city of Westfield.
No, I'm good. A lot of things going on. Spring is springing.
Is it springing? What's coming up on your schedule that you have to take care of?
Hold on. Bob was talking in my ear.
Bob. My turn, Bob. That's okay. You'll excuse it.
No, there's just all kinds of, it's budget season, so
Okay.
extra meetings for different committees and things like that, and people have got their priorities going, and now there's stuff happening. Like we covered the Boys and Girls Club 10K last week and half marathon, and
Excellent.
I think wasn't your truck out at Fantastic?
no, it was not.
Oh, it
we
wasn't?
unfortunately we had nobody there to cover it.
Okay.
We same thing with the spring sing.
But Pops in March.
We did pops.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we did
Okay.
the Pops.
Yeah.
Peter, if anybody wants to know about any of these budget hearings and things coming up, where would they go to find that information?
City of Westfield website for the Finance Committee holds all the budget hearings with all the departments, and then obviously keep an eye on the City Council agendas because that's where the stuff happens. And school committee is going through their budget right now as well. So
Yes.
you really got to kind of pay attention, and if you're really serious about it, don't just watch the meeting on TV. If you're really passionate about it, you need to go to the meeting. Actually show up.
Correct. Or we don't want to hear from you.
Well, it's not that. It's, my dad used to be, if you don't vote in an election, you have no right to complain about the outcome or the politicians involved in the election.
Excellent. Good advice.
Yep.
I'll go with that. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. So before we get started, and we do have the professor in the building again, always love to have Nick on board because I can just sit back. In fact, I can go home and have another cup of coffee. It's okay with me. But before we get started, a couple things that I really want to point out to you. If this is not, I don't know, Bob is motioning.
Bob might have left something in the studio.
Can you open the door and let Bob in?
I can open the door. Sure. Hold on.
Let's open the door
I'm
and
going to
let
sing
Bob
I'm
in.
going to sing the Who while I do it. If that's okay.
We apologize for this. We have Bob Plass on the
He
other
may have
side
left
of the
something
door.
in the studio is what the
So-
problem is.
Oh, here he comes
He
again.
forgot something.
There you go.
Is it time for my appointment?
Oh, Peter, what a start. What a start. Bye, Bob. Thank you. And that's Bob Plass, everyone. For those of you who know them, you will certainly understand what's going on
Bob
here,
Plass
although we
open the
don't, but
door.
that's okay.
Let Bob Plass open the door.
He found
right,
the
sorry.
item he was
Go
looking
ahead.
for. It's in his back pocket.
All right, let's regroup here. Refocus.
Do you want to start again, or do you just want to keep trudging on?
No.
This is entertaining.
We'll just keep it. Speaking of entertainment, thank you for
This
that
is what used
segue.
to happen when we were doing things live on the air, but now it's just
Oh, I know.
an extension of being.
I know. I give up, and I don't even have Carol here to blame.
But you have multiple entertainment things you wanted to reference.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did. So back in the 40s, which is historical, 40s and 50s, the big dancing musicals were the thing. So this is a little history, Nick.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Little history. Please get down to the Westfield Theater Group, a department of the Westfield Women's Club, right on Court Street, 28 Court Street, right across from the Athenaeum and the bank, and see 42nd Street. It is absolutely one of the best performances that I've ever seen on our stage.
And I believe you have
And,
3 more opportunities. Is that
You
right?
have 3 more opportunities. The tickets are going really fast,
They are,
Nick. There was
yeah.
almost a full house on Saturday. So we really recommend that you try to get your tickets online. There are some available at the door, but online is the way to go. So that's 42nd Street, Friday night, Saturday afternoon, and Saturday evening. Please get to see it. It's well worth the price. You will enjoy it, and you will be proud that Westfield has this kind of a community theater. Historical note, we have been in the city of Westfield since the 1930s. There you go. That makes it history happens in Westfield.
But you have another entertainment that is even more closely tied to history at the Women's Club as well, right?
We do. Thank you for that intro. You really read the directions,
Did.
didn't you? I'm so proud of you, Dr. Aida. Yes, we do. On March 3rd, we have a presentation coming up called, I don't even know what it's called because it's every time I see it, it's written a different way, but it's basically Westfield women walking through history or walking through history with Westfield women, whichever way you want to put it. But here's what I noticed, Nick, and maybe you can comment on this. When I'm looking at Westfield history, what are the names we always see?
Well, I mean, Fowlers and Falleys and Deweys and Nobles and so on.
Atwaters,
Yeah,
Sackett's.
Atwaters.
And it's always the men. So the idea is that,
Right.
well, there weren't any women here.
Gillette's.
Nettie Stevens.
Nettie Stevens.
Can you
sure.
tell us about Nettie Stevens?
Well, one of the early pioneers in a bunch of different kinds of science, a real important instructor at what was then the normal school, and really a figure that I learned more about, I would say, probably 5-6 years ago as we were completing the project that eventually became the new wing of science lab spaces that we named after Nettie
The
Stevens.
Nettie Stevens building, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Responsible for the XY chromosome, is that correct?
Yep.
Responsible for finding that the chromosome differences in male and female XY chromosomes. So we can look at her. And and I've gone up and down the road every time and I see Nettie Stevens out there and I'm ashamed to say I had no idea who that woman was.
But is she part of your production?
No, actually, she is. She is mentioned.
She's
yes.
mentioned. Okay,
Yes,
yeah,
she is mentioned. She is not one of the characters. And what I tried to do in this, Nick, is I tried to find historic people in the city that you maybe wouldn't be that familiar with.
Oh, right. Okay.
Like everybody knows who Lucy Gillett was, or historians know Lucy Gillett. You know, they tell the story, and she donated money for the Athenaeum, and she donated money for the Women's Club, and she donated the rectory for the church, and she donated money for the YMCA, and she drove around in her car all over town without a license, and they just sort of looked the other way when she was coming through. Well-known character, but we know about her. So I tried to choose some of the names that maybe you wouldn't be that familiar with. However, and I have to mention this to Nick, so please excuse my digression, we noticed something in the research about Wareham Parks.
Ah.
On the signage downtown, on the park,
Yeah, the little at Columbia and I forget the exchange there.
it's
Union.
in there.
is-
Yes,
yeah.
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's WAREHAM.
Yeah.
His name is WAR.
Yeah.
And then one of the commissioners pointed out the name on the sign says Wareham Parks, but it's Wareham Parks Park.
Right.
It looks like his last name was Wareham.
Which is not the case.
Correct.
It's his first name. If you
Correct.
anybody who journeys to the old burying ground can at least make that correction in their mind. But yes, I understand why that would be confusing for people.
And I've never noticed it, and I've lived
Right.
here all my life. But
Right.
maybe that's something we should attend to. At
Yeah, that's
some
an
point.
interesting one because that sign is one of the older, notations. We had one of the older ones that was of a similar vintage was fixed up on Western Avenue. Right
Are you
across from
thinking
Pine
of
Hill.
Holcomb Parks?
Yeah, right across
Holcomb
from
Parks.
Pine Hill. They had one of those same kinds of wooden brown signs, and that got replaced when they redid that point.
Oh,
Basically,
okay.
between
right.
Silver and Western there, or Court. Is it still Court there? I can never remember. Is it Court until Noble? Is that what it is, basically? And then it becomes
That's a
Western?
really good question. I'm thinking,
I feel like I should
Peter,
do that.
does Western Avenue start right after Pine Hill Cemetery?
Western Ave starts at the tip of the Y.
Yeah, so the park I'm talking about. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that little
Right.
pocket park there. It
Yeah.
starts right where the bend is at that where everything meets up as a
So
Y.
there you go. So I wonder if, all these, because the Wareham Parks Park, there we go.
The
Say that.
park.
The park with his name attached. Anyway, that is a similar kind of odd space. You know, it's just this strange little triangle where 1, 2, 3 streets kind of come together, you know, and
Yep.
so you wonder if we can discover in our own records at the commission, like when were
When
these
they
signs
did it,
put in?
yeah.
I don't know the answer to that, so yeah.
I can give you a stranger one.
Okay, go.
Before they redid the traffic pattern where Granville Road and Western Avenue come together,
Yeah.
there used to be a tiny triangle, a traffic island, a little tiny triangle that you went around to go down Granville Road, and you went around the right to go down Court Street. Are you familiar with that area?
So
There you go.
we're
There's
looking,
there's
Is
what
that it?
Google Maps
we're
says.
looking at some of it here, and this is where they redid part of the triangle, and then up the street a bit is the one you're referring
No,
to.
yes, I'm
Yeah.
I'm up the street past
Just a little bit
Highland
west.
School.
Yeah.
Past
There we
Highland
go.
School.
He's getting us there. He's
Here
getting
we
us
go,
there.
folks.
There it is.
All right. See that little itsy bitsy
Yeah.
piece there? There used to be a park. The tip of that meeting spot was a. I am not making this up. This is not my delusions or illusions.
So where the stop sign is, basically.
Well, it's all
The yield
different
or
now,
whatever
so
it is?
I don't. They've rearranged the traffic patterns, so I can't exactly tell you because it was a tiny triangle cut
Yeah.
off. That was designated a park. For some reason, they told me at Park and Rec. I believe the man that used to live in that house originally had that piece in honor of somebody.
So he had it designated, or
And I will look it
Oh,
up.
the piece on the left-hand side of the screen.
It was, I'm not quite sure where it was, Peter, now, because it's all different, but it was a little triangle right where, it was weird. It was very weird.
So that's an interesting project for people to think about. Like, you know, one of the things we're going to talk about today is memorialization and how we're not always sure, you know, where, when, et cetera, because the memorialization isn't always done right at the moment, right? So it's sometimes but that would be interesting to figure out, like, why
Yeah.
they did that. I want to bring you back, though.
We're going
because
back to March 3rd, and then
May
we're going
3rd.
to get over to you.
May 3rd, not March 3rd.
May 3rd at 2 o'clock at the Westfield Women's Club. There is an event. We have about 12 or 13 people involved in it. I think you will enjoy it if you like Westfield Theater, 2 o'clock. It is free, open to the public, so please come on down. It is being supported by the Mass Cultural Council and the Westfield Cultural Council, and it's part of the Women's Voices grant received by the Westfield Women's Club.
How many women do you have planned out here for this portrayal?
I think there's 12. There's 11 or 12.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
Great.
There's 9. There's 3 from each. No, there's 10. There's 1 from the 1600s, and then there's 3
then you
from
got
every century.
The errors,
Yes,
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
So we'll be able to talk about that. Don't ask me any questions beyond that because I don't know. And finding it, Doctor, you are the historian. Please tell me, how do you get the correct information?
Well, you don't always, and it's okay. I mean, this is one of those things I talk about with students all the time, and even, you know, students who are also seeking teaching licensure in addition to students who are just doing their research projects. You have to accept that some of the information you're finding is not necessarily going to be corroborated very easily. And when it's not corroborated, that can be okay, but you want to take the time to ask yourself an important question. Is this a really important piece that's tied to an argument I'm trying to make that I really need to figure out, is this true? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't, you know.
I get it. I used the Find a Grave for some of the to find out the deaths of some of them. I also used our inventory for the OBG.
Yep.
I used some of the John Lockwood books. I used the Tricentennial books. I used the old Indian deeds.
Right.
And then one case, I used one of Bob Brown's video on the mansion on the end of Broad Street. So
Thayer, right?
yeah, the Thayer
Mansion.
Mansion. I used several different, and I tried to cross-reference. But for example, Laurie Furkey's character, Catherine Noble, I found totally conflicting information on her. But I went with what you're saying. The important thing wasn't, was she paid this much or was she paid that much? What exactly? The important thing is they hired her to run a dame school in Westfield
Right.
in the 1700s. That to me was the takeaway, not the date that they hired her.
No, it's
I
great if you can
couldn't-
find all those other details. But as you were talking to me about this as you were developing it, and yeah, there are contradictions. I think we go through this anytime we're providing background information on characters for any of our ghost talks, or anything about people who are buried, or well, even people we know who are buried in the burying ground and are relatively well known. We still sometimes find contradictory information, and part of the challenge is, as you know, the names. So many people end up with the same name, and so you have to make sure. When we were doing the research on Gillum Ashley, the African-American soldier who was enslaved and sent to the Revolution by Dr. Ashley, we had to figure out which Dr. Ashley because they had the same first name. They were both medical doctors, and and we knew it had to be the younger, but still, you had to work your way through. Well, no, wait, that one is dead, and so it's got to be this one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I ran into that with the Fowlers
Oh yeah.
because
sure.
they're all named
Yep.
the same name, and then this one died, and then they named the second one the same name.
Right.
Enough of that. Let's move on to you.
Sure.
So I'm just going to sit here and do nothing and listen to you because certainly you knew more. My problem here, folks, we've done the Knox Noble Trail of Artillery, and what always bothers me with Henry Knox, honestly, is all people remember is the cannon.
Right.
So we've been trying, and we took 2 shows to talk about Henry Knox.
Yeah, we ended up taking 2 shows to talk about it, and we realized that the 3/4 point, I think, on the second show. Hey, wait a minute, we still haven't really moved past Springfield.
Exactly.
and so we want to acknowledge that one of the things we're trying to do here in 2026 and in some other important years connected to the American Revolution is we want to make Westfield connections. This is a Westfield connection, certainly, because of where Knox travels. The travels of Knox from Ticonderoga back to the city of Boston are, you can't say well documented because his own journal he stops really keeping during the trip. So that's a challenge. And then we have sort of these bits, and they come to us in different instances. Some of them were collected as oral history that was then written down in the 1820s and the 1830s. And that's not necessarily problematic other than the fact that the individuals we were, like in our last program, we were talking about one individual who was about 11 years old when he was working with his father as one of the Teamster helpers coming out of the Albany area in New York, and went as far as Springfield and then went back with his father. But he was part of a group of people who were reminiscing post 1826. 1826 is when Lafayette came back to the United States. He was quite young. Lafayette was, during the Revolution. And one of the things he did coming back in 1826 was to travel some of those same routes that he had gone. So there's a whole story of Lafayette's time in Western Massachusetts, in New York, and in other places. At any rate, that also inspired Americans to start reminiscing about and catching the dying generation, of revolutionary people. Because 1826 is also the same year that John Adams dies, and also the same year that Thomas Jefferson dies. They die on the same day, of course, which is another weird thing. The other weird thing, as you recall, is when do they die?
July 4th.
The 4th, 1826. So it's kind of creepy. So we're, this year we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration, but also the 200th celebrate, but honor the 200th anniversary of their death. So Americans began to realize, well, maybe we need to actually write down the stuff that some of these people remember. So they start to, they interview surviving people from the Boston Tea Party, and they interview people connected to the Boston Massacre, and they interview people, obviously not the dead, but the others. They interview people connected to the Revolution itself, and of course, in Massachusetts, that means the Knox story. And New York does its part as well, and that's when you start to see published in the 1820s and 30s these now what had been oral histories or traditions and so on written down and published. And that's where we get a lot of the stuff from because, again, Knox had letters written as well as journal entries. We have materials from George Washington's records that give us a parameter for the dates, but then we kind of lose track of the exactitudes, I guess you could say. But we do have a few of those. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and what happens after they cross the Connecticut River and get moving east. And one of the things that is also, and we've talked about this before, but I'll reference it briefly again, is that all this is a response to the invasion, right, of Massachusetts, at least the perception for Massachusetts provincials, that they've been invaded by these British forces and so on. So we've got on the screen here the rough route, and basically what this is capturing for you, and this is from the Historic Battlefield Trust, is capturing for you the general way in which they walked and identifying some of the main towns along the way. It's not meant to be an exact, and then they were on Route 20, and then, that kind of thing. But in the 1920s, Benjamin Haley, has written about this and spoken about this quite recently here in town in Westfield. But he also spoke last year at the Dublin Folk Seminar at Historic Deerfield on the issue of, you get to the 200th anniversary, 150th anniversary in the 1920s, and it's about tourism, right? It's about connecting with existing roadways that are built for the new automobile access.
Yep.
And so we're going to put the signs up to kind of get close to where these things were happening. And that's not necessarily the big importance here, right? We want to know, what happened? Okay, great. We know that he got the cannon from Ticonderoga. We know that Boston had been occupied by different levels of British forces going back to the late 1760s. And occupied isn't the right word prior to 1770, and certainly isn't really, even between 1770 and 1773, it's not quite the right word. It's simply that troops from the British regular army had been placed in North America for a variety of different reasons, most of which were sort of hangovers and fallout from the war that the Americans referred to as the French and Indian War, but that in Europe was more often referred to as the 7 Years' War.
7 years, yep.
And that conflict resulted in the British government making determinations that, we have to have regulars prepared to go into rotation at various colonial spaces, including, obviously, provincial Massachusetts. So when the massacre occurs, as the British Americans call it, in 1770, part of that we've talked about before, but part of that's about tensions between the citizenry in Boston and these regular soldiers who are quartered there. Remember that, yes, you might be a regular soldier, but it didn't mean that you didn't need more money. So in some ways, these regular soldiers are competing for jobs. They're also competing for women in some cases, and it sounds like sort of odd, but some of the soldiers who came with wives and families. They were often stationed in Ireland beforehand, especially the portions of Ireland that had been occupied by the British military going back to the 1600s and 1500s. And they were, if they weren't already married, they were looking to get married. These are young men who are interested, in some cases, in not returning to England. Maybe they're going to stay here because they're British, we're British, everybody's British, so what's the problem in staying? By the time you get to the, just leading up to the revolution itself, so 73, 74, and ultimately the spring of 75, that kind of tension is really boiling over in many respects. But there are many people who are still quite loyal, obviously, to Parliament, and Lucy Flucker is one of these people, right? She ends up marrying Henry Knox, but her family is quite loyal. Her father is the secretary for the province of Massachusetts, and so they're devastated. Her parents, when she ends up marrying Henry Knox. By the time we get to the removal of the cannon from Ticonderoga, Knox is aware that the cannon have been captured. They were captured in the spring of 1775. Benedict Arnold, before he heads to Canada for his attempted invasion, has suggested that maybe we need to move some of those Ticonderoga cannon over here to deal with the British threat in Boston. And Knox continues that because Arnold, by the fall of 1775, is in Canada. Well, he's in northern Maine trying to get to Canada. We've already talked about that. It was a disaster. But at any rate, so Washington listens to Knox's recommendation, and Knox is sent. He and his brother head out to Ticonderoga in November of 1775, and the journey out is pretty there isn't a lot to report. Washington also sends notes to Philip Schuyler, encouraging him to support Knox's plan. And as they start out, things go fine. So once we get past Westfield and into Springfield, then the weather has turned slightly. There are some challenges in terms of, well, who's going to actually guide these tons of artillery to the east, and but post January 13th, Knox is ready to get moving, and the question here is, well, how are we going to do that? We don't need the aux necessarily. We can't use the Teamsters from New York. They're saying we're not going anymore.
Right.
So
right.
he hires the Massachusetts folks, and they use it for the most part going east, horses. And the other thing that we're pretty clear on is that there were a lot more horses used than is typically presumed. I think we like the oxen are great. I love seeing the oxen at all these events that I've gone to.
Yeah.
But the truth is they probably were mostly used from portions of the border, in New York. But the large bulk of the oxen were probably used coming down from Blandford into Westfield and then to Springfield. That's about it, because they were able to use horse to
Well, it's flatter, correct? It's
Yeah.
not
So
as-
even though you got to get over some hills, to get into Worcester County, right, and so on. The issue with the oxen here was because they're strong enough, and then you use the block and pulley, tackle systems and the trees and all these other things to make sure that you're not going to go out of control as you're coming down the hill. And you don't have quite the same kinds of steep drop
Correct.
In some of these other spaces. So what we know is that there's some discrepancy about when Knox arrives in Cambridge himself. We are pretty confident that he arrives in Cambridge to report to Washington prior to the cannon actually getting there. And there's a couple of potential reasons for that. One thing, it's surmised that he is likely getting there ahead of time to have counsel with Washington and other officers and try to figure out, where do we want to send these cannon? Because they didn't necessarily want to put all of them in one place. So that's one issue. And then the other thing that they're discussing is how do we have the ammunition, basically? Do we have all the, because he did take some of that, certainly. He took flints, he took other things. But the other interesting piece here is that earlier while he was going to Ticonderoga, a U.S. ship captured, named after Charles Lee of Virginia, of course. The Virginia Lees.
I know the Lees.
We can sing the song, but we're not going to. Anyway, this
I vote.
yeah. So this ship was a supply ship from the British. It was named the Nancy, and it was captured by the Lee in late November 1775. And then they brought that ship into Beverly, so north of Boston, and unloaded it, and they had 2,000 muskets, and they had something like 8,000 fuses for the shot that would go into these kinds of cannon that were coming from Ticonderoga. They had 3,000 pieces of solid shot for
I never heard
12-pounders, right? And nobody, yes, he brought a lot from Ticonderoga, but the other question was, wow, if this doesn't work and we don't have any more ammunition, what are we going to do? Throw the cannon at them? I mean, and I'm being a little bit glib.
No, that's true.
But and then he had also in the Nancy was about 100,000 flints. Now, why am I bringing this up? This is because this illustrates one of the problems that the British had. Once they were hemmed in Boston, Yeah, they defeated the Continental forces and the militia outside of Boston and Charlestown on Breed's Hill, basically, in June of 1775. However, heavy losses, and the British Americans showed that they could resist regular soldiers, so that was an important thing. And also, what the British talked about, and we discussed this in an earlier program as well, is how impressed they were by how these colonial soldiers, who they had sort of assumed were not really competent, not only fought effectively there, but effectively removed themselves from the battlefield when they knew they could no longer, maintain the field. And that caused people like Gage and others to be concerned. Like they were thinking, okay, we
it's
have
not
a
gonna be
problem.
this easy.
We have a problem. So we have these troops encircling the space. So what had been an occupied space or quartered space of British regular troops has something in the neighborhood of about 14,000 militia and regular, what is now being called the Continental troops, outside of Boston. There's a little over 600 artillerymen who are working alongside Knox. Inside Boston, there's about 17,000 people who live there, so there's them, right? Quite a few of whom are loyalists. Quite a few more are actually quite neutral. They're sort of, could we stop shooting? I guess basically is the big thing that they're after. And then there's about 13,500 or so British troops that are inside the city. So that's significant. There's maybe 30,000 people in here when there would have normally been a shade under 18,000. And Boston is not what we might know it as today. It's a very inaccessible spit of land that the British are supplying now almost wholly by sea. So the capture of the Nancy was important because this was ammunition and other things intended for the British military. But the other problem is the British are also having to bring food in. And so they're bringing food from a variety of places. There's one story in this late winter to early spring in which they're not getting the food in good order, partially because bad weather will intervene, as often happens, and the ships have to be redirected. So when your ship with food on it is redirected to the Carolinas or Virginia or even as far as the Bahamas or Barbados, then it gets to Boston later. How's that meat and vegetables doing? And so it's not great. Yes. And so Little Foods is reaching the city, and the city is surrounded. So I think, one of the things that the British realize is the British Americans know, we can't push them out because, and although Washington wondered, should I assault the city? I mean, he wondered this. But around the same time that Knox is returning, and the cannon are sitting outside of the city in Framingham, they're reassembling them, they're putting them back on the wheels and that kind of thing. Some of the lighter pieces, the heavier ones, they're going to leave in their carriages and so on. But the ones that could be dragged by their own wheels, they're reassembling that stuff, taking them off the sledges and other ways in which they'd unpack them to get them east. And he comes into the city around the same time, as we've mentioned before, that people get the news that it didn't work in Canada, right? So now Washington is armed with a couple of things. He's got these extra bits of ammunition that are brought into his forces because of the capture of the Nancy. He's got the cannon from Ticonderoga. He's got a man who he's pretty confident not only, could get the cannon here, but actually kind of knows what he's doing. Keep in mind, Knox was book taught. We've talked a little bit about this already. I mean, he was, a voracious reader. This isn't just because he's a bookseller, but because he wanted to do his part, not only in understanding the philosophy behind the revolution, but also, what are we going to have to do militarily? What do we have to do to actually win? And so he was consuming a lot of training manuals and other materials, not only on cannon, but also on siege works and other bits. So they know that maybe an assault isn't the best idea. That's a question. And so I'm using a couple of sources here just to give our listeners a little bit of understanding. So if you want to know about the early parts that we were talking about, great books like Eric Hinderaker's Boston's Massacre, which is a really wonderful, it's a really great,
Effective,
a
accurate.
strong and effective, thank you, interpretation of not only the events of 1770, but then how did Americans begin to remember those events going forward?
Okay.
And that's a really interesting piece. And Serena Zabin's book is amazing. And that's the one you want to read. If you want to know, well, what were these British soldiers doing in the town? How did they get quartered there? What did they think about this? Why were they looking for wives? Why were they coming with their families? Her book's amazing in terms of giving you this wonderful sense of the family life, the need for occupations beyond being a soldier, all that stuff. And then and those are more recent books. And then we kind of go backwards in time, and you can look at a couple of different things. You can certainly look at Robert Middlecoff's The Glorious Cause, and there's like little bits in there that are going to talk about this. David McCullough's 1776, again, is going to have little bits related to the evacuation in Boston. And then you go backwards into Alan French, who wrote a piece called The Siege of Boston a long time ago. It was republished in the 1960s, and that's a while ago, but it was written way before that. And so you can get it on, you can get that on Project Gutenberg online, so you can just
I'm familiar.
look through that. And that can be a helpful, sort of narrative sense of what's going on, because one of the things that French does supply is some of those little details that we were talking about earlier, like, well, how do I make this stuff all come together, And then when Bob was in, I was mentioning an unusually named North Callahan, who published in 1964 a piece on Henry Knox himself. And he did it at the behest of Douglas Southwell Freeman, who was doing a lot of stuff with the Washington papers, writing on Washington, and then also goes and writes a whole bunch on Civil War generals, particularly Southern Civil War generals. That's a whole other problematic conversation, but we'll save that for another time. But Freeman was asked by hey, who do we not know a lot about in the Revolution? And Freeman's response to Callahan was, well, Henry Knox. We have basics, but we don't know a lot, and that inspired Callahan, and so that book was published about 12 years before the bicentennial. So those are older sources that, combined with some of the newer assessments of the year, 1776, like McCullough, or Middlecoff's Glorious Cause, which is the whole of the Revolution, kind of start to fill in the blanks for you a little bit. There's also a wonderful writer, oh my gosh, the name just went right out of my head. It's initials, which is why it's not sticking with me. So at any rate, who has done a lot of nice stuff online. And so if you do searches for Knox, you'll find their postings. And they do a lot of great stuff with mapping and like trying to pull together journal pieces and so on. And he's worked with the National Historic Park in Lexington and Concord, as well as some other things. So at any rate, so now we're sitting, it's January, and Washington, and I'm pulling this from Alan French's piece here, has said, well, maybe I should storm the town, meaning Boston in this case, right? And I'll quote from French here for a moment. But as often as he called a council of war to consider the matter, so often did his generals say, do not. So burning the town by throwing carcasses into it. His officer said no. So
Okay, well.
and so he looked for a chance to assault the town by crossing on the ice, because the Back Bay didn't flow all the way through winter, but this winter it did. So we don't have the ice, and he had neither. But then he ultimately came to the conclusion that he didn't have the men, and he didn't necessarily have the powder. to be able to guarantee that they could do this. But when Knox arrives and he's informing him, this is what's going on, he feels more confident. Elbridge Gerry and John Adams go out to Framingham. They want to see the cannon, so they go out there and they see them. They're back from Philadelphia, back and forth, between Massachusetts and Philadelphia. At this point, they're in Massachusetts, and so they feel confident that this can help get the job done. And basically, with the arrival of these cannon, they start to think, we can do this. We can position the cannon at various places around Boston itself. And what we can do is not necessarily have to attack the city itself, but rather get cannon into position to reinforce certain forts and position and redoubts and other things they had outside of the city. More important, get cannon into position to be able to launch into British ships that are supplying the city. And that becomes the key point.
We don't think of that, do we?
No.
We think of just the city.
Right.
Good
and
point.
I think,
Good information.
and part of that is, again, the pieces I pulled from Alan French here where, they're talking about, well, what could we do? Well, maybe we could set things on fire and launch them into the city. Maybe we could, assault the city. And again, the officers are suggesting maybe the residents of Boston, remember, there's over 17,000
They might not
people
like
in there
that.
who don't necessarily want the city burned and other things.
Correct.
Now, what's going on in the city? We've talked about food shortages. There's also other challenges. It's winter, so, in some cases, big portions of certain buildings are getting torn apart to be used as firewood because you can't go out of the city. And it's not like the British Americans on the outside of the city are going to say, sure, we'll sell you firewood, to keep you warm.
Let's throw it in.
Yeah. So pieces of the North Church are being pulled apart. And there's a double meaning there, right? I mean, clearly, I think the British are, they know what they're doing in targeting the North Church to take apart pews, to take apart parts of the building itself and burn it. And for our listeners who don't remember, the North Church is where the British American rebels had used as a signal tower to indicate which way the British troops were going in April of 1775. So we're here, and you're listening to us, and we're a day after the Patriots' Day, which is the state holiday here in the Commonwealth, which is about one part of the Revolution. But for many, many years, another state holiday, and certainly within Boston remained an important holiday, was March 17th, which is the evacuation day.
Oh, I thought you were going to say St. Patrick's.
Well, it conveniently ended up being both, right? And I wonder, Peter, if you have any of the maps you want to throw up, because I can talk a little bit about why they ended up doing what they did. So this map is from right before, about a year before the assault, and what we're seeing really here is how Boston is in the middle of a lot of water. And so you see all these islands off the coast, out in the harbor, and you also have a sense of how difficult it is to get stuff in and out of here. And the British American soldiers and others, so the militia, the newly crowned or minted, I should say, I guess I shouldn't say crowned, right, for the rebels in this case, but the newly minted Continental soldiers, they are on these areas outside of the space. To the north, up in this map, is where they brought the Nancy up to Beverly. They're clearly not going to bring the Nancy right into Boston Harbor because the British control it, but they sail it up to this other harbor north. So they could have chosen Salem or Beverly, and they went with Beverly. It's a little bit easier for what they were trying to unload. At any rate, this gives us a sense of why the sea was so important to the British. And then we got another map that kind of shows us why Washington and Knox make the decisions they make to say, this is where we're going to put the cannon. So in this case, what we see here is that little odd spit that is sitting up there is Boston itself. And we're really unfamiliar with this as 21st century people because there's not that much water.
All that land's filled in now,
Yeah,
right?
and all that land is filled in, exactly, right? And Peter, you may know that, I mean, they started filling it in the early 1800s.
There was a lot of landfill material.
Yep. So they started using.
This is a stupid question, but
Yeah.
where did they get the fill?
So Beacon Hill used to be taller.
That I knew.
Which is part of the answer to your question.
Okay.
Cornhill is another spot, and other spaces. They essentially dragged stuff in. Now it's tidal here. You know, the Charles was an estuary. It would get relatively shallow, and then this angle gives us a really nice view of, and in color too, which is helpful, of what the problem is. So this, you have to orient yourself a little bit differently. This is slightly north by northeast. The Red Sox managed to win today, I will point out, and they play in the space that is water, right? And so as Peter pointed out, it's filled in. That's why it's called the Back Bay.
The Back Bay.
Right?
Yep.
And in addition, the area where Fenway is made was referred to as the Fens,
The Fens.
right? Because it was still swampy and these other things. Filling in cities is a time-honored thing that humans do all over the place. The Mexica did it in what is now called Mexico City. Tenochtitlan was,
Yep.
yeah. It was like it was basically a lake, and we see this in other places in the world, and so post-revolution, the Americans do this. This map gives us a nice, again, sense of it, and it's good to have it in the order we had it in because we see, okay, here's the waterway. Here's how Boston is on this spit. Now, here we are, and we're seeing, there's at least 2 spaces, and they end up choosing 4, where it's obvious you need to put cannon. And so the way this particular map is angled, as we're looking at Noodles Island, and we come straight west into Boston itself, you see this narrow stretch of land. That was at what was called the Roxbury Gate, and it was literally a gate into the city. So the Americans had control of that space.
Okay, I've read about the gate.
Yeah. A lot of people read it and think, oh, yeah, okay. But they don't think about, like, well, how could you build a gate there,
I
right?
didn't know where they were. I didn't know
Yeah.
what they're talking about.
And you can see how narrow it is. So it's sort of
Now I get it.
right? So some of the bigger cannon from Ticonderoga go there because, look, you're not getting out this way. We're sticking these right here, right? Then some people some listeners may be familiar with the Boston Museum of Science and Lechmere, when what was referred to at this time as Lechmere Point. The Lechmere stop on the green line of the MBTA is right there. And so that's another space that's back a bit from Charlestown here. And so they're putting cannon there too, because we don't want a ship sneaking in the back way to supply the city. So we've got some of the cannon there. Then at Cobble Hill, another raised point. And then finally, of course, most famously, we know Dorchester Heights, which is really...
That's the one you always hear about, though.
That's the main one that people talk about, right?
Yeah.
Bush Tree Hill in particular. And on our map here, that is indicated by that kind of, I don't even know how to describe it, but if we're on the spit of land where I pointed out Roxbury Gate is, and then you see the thing that looks like somebody broke their arm and it fell down,
Yeah, I get it.
that's the
I get it.
Dorchester Heights part, is
Okay.
the part that's hanging down. And so that's where another set, right, of the cannon were utilized. They did leave a few behind in Framingham in case, they needed to move them elsewhere, but the others, come into these positions. So on March 2nd, there we go. That's a cool view, actually, that gives us a sense of the modern space, and you can just barely see, like, oh yeah, okay, I can see how the Charles River would have been bigger, or the Back Bay, as it were. And so all that space there, it's okay for drivers also. Look, this is the only grid part of Boston, right? I mean, the Back Bay.
No, you do not drive in Boston.
The Back Bay has the grid because of how they built it. And then the harbor Dorchester Heights is in what is now the neighborhood of South Boston, and so those cannon that get put there are placed there in cover after a couple of diversionary attempts, one on March 2nd, one on March 4th. And what Washington's trying to do, okay, on the British side, they're saying maybe we'll just bust out of the city and we'll just force them back. Washington actually is thinking, yeah, come on, right? Like he wants that because he doesn't really want us doing. He's listening to the other officers, right? He doesn't want us to do the assault that he was thinking about in late January and February. And so on March 2nd, they use a diversionary bombardment, and they start to put a bunch of things in place. So what are they putting in place? Some of the cannon, which some had already been put in place. They do lose 3 mortars in here at some point. Knox is unclear. Washington's unclear as to whether is it because they were using them improperly. Is it the weather? Like something happened where they became unusable. But that's a minor amount. Keep in mind he was bringing 60 tons of cannon, right? So I mean, 3 mortars are not gonna. It's not going to make the difference here in this case. And honestly, in the 18th century, it wasn't uncommon to lose a cannon here or there, and mortars and so on. So he's got the diversionary bombardment in there. They also put in some fake cannon at different places.
Ooh.
So they're using a little bit of subterfuge here, right?
The trees.
Because they realize, okay, yes, we have more than they think, but we don't want them to know where the things are necessarily, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And they also start to build some things to protect in case, because Washington is concerned, as is Knox, that they're going to try what they did in Charlestown, that they're going to land troops and they're going to bring them right up these hills and try to attack. So they bundle together these things that are called fascines. You could do a couple things with them. One thing you can do with them, though, is you can roll them down the hill as soldiers come at you, right? So, and then the other thing they're doing is they're filling together a variety of things with stones and dirt and chaining those together and like building up these barricades. General Howe's commentary so they do another diversion March 4th. So March 2nd is one, March 4th is another. There is some firing back and forth. There are some damage to some houses, but nothing like what would have happened if they really tried
to set fire.
Yeah, set fire to the whole city. And they moved on the 4th of March is when they start to move these things up Bush Tree Hill in Dorchester Heights. When the day dawns, General Howe's commentary later is, and I'll quote him here, "The rebels have done more in one night than my whole army have done in a month."
I've heard that.
Right. And that's a great kind of compliment, anger, right, on his part, certainly. He's very frustrated, and he's very annoyed that this has happened. Why, right? And so those cannon that they placed in these other spots, Roxbury, Cobble Hill, Leechmere Point, those are the ones that are the diversionary, right? Mm-hmm. And then they get these fellas up on the hill. And Washington's purpose was, again, as well as Knox, their purpose was to, attract attention.
Another one.
So this one is a good sense of the overlay for us, right? And it shows us what things, and in fact, what you can see outlined there is that broken arm now facing to our east. And that has all that land out there. So when you're up there now, I was there on March 17th this year to see the evacuation day speeches and so on. And there's a whole neighborhood around the, around the hills. But when you're up on top of that hill, you can really see, okay, that would be a problem for shipping, because you could put cannon facing to the south, and so you've got that inlet. No, we're good there.
Gotcha.
And then that whole area that Peter's put up for us that is new pier systems, the new seaport of Boston, right? All that space, that was all water. And so that's all spaces where these folks are coming in on, with supplies and other things. Well, now they can't because you've got Cannon over there on what's labeled East Cambridge on this map. You've got Cannon down by the neck, which is identified on this map as well. And you've got Cannon on this South Boston Hill. And so, there isn't really an opportunity to do this.
Is all of the bay waters then, was it deep enough to come in all the way?
Yeah. It was still tidal. You couldn't necessarily get deep into the back bay part.
Okay.
Certain ships could, but you can't. Like, if we think back to the Tea Party, no, you had to land at Long Wharf. You couldn't, bring your ship into the back bay. And then that area that Peter was just showing us is it's all tidal flats. And so,
can you just for the folks at home,
Yeah.
tell them what a tidal flat really
so
is? I
okay,
know, but-
yeah. So if you don't live near the ocean, you're not
Correct.
as familiar with this. But essentially, it's space that at certain times of the day is going to be pretty filled. Not necessarily for a deep supply ship or a troop ship, but fishing vessels and light shipping, can certainly go in there. But at a real low tide, it's going to mean you literally can walk from the base of what was the Dorchester Heights, into the city. Now, okay, I say literally walk. You really can't because you
It's
sink.
mushy.
Yeah, exactly. You sink
But
in the
I know
mud.
but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
You'd see
It's-
dirt or
yeah.
mud.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult
Yeah.
to maneuver. And so you can't land troops there, which was the other thing. And if you're going to try to land them to try to assault that hill, you got to put them on these longboats, row them to a certain amount, and then they have to get out of the boat, and then they have to get through the mud, and then they have to, So it's from the British perspective, it's a nightmare. And from the perspective of Howe, at the moment, he looks at it and he said, well, this is played out. So it's March 4th. What are we doing? Well, they're ready. And now, once the confusion of the discovery is made, Howe sees this, right? He calls a council of war, and basically they declare, well, the fleet is completely at the mercy of the rebel army. And so,
See,
oops. I mean, it's not Admiral Akbar. It's it's a trap. But it's close. Sorry, Star Wars reference.
Good one.
But, anyway, we've got how basically, and just for people who aren't familiar, the military, the Army commander and the Navy commander of the British at this point are related. They're brothers, and so the Howes are having this military council together, and they're sort of like, oh boy, this isn't good. And they do make an attempt to do an attack. Washington, points out in his own stuff he would have welcomed this. They had reinforced the spaces where they thought it was going to happen, and then they had done another thing, which is they had created bateaux or floating batteries. So they had taken other cannon they had and put them on these floating batteries, so they could move them if Howe were to take troops and, okay, I'm going to assault, where these things are so we can get the ships in, then these batteries would just move around and rake these soldiers with artillery fire. So, there was a lot of good planning in this case. And then mercifully, nature played a part in this, and there was a massive storm. And the British decided, well, no, this isn't going to work. And so the decision was made to evacuate the city. The accompanying heavy rain and so on by March the 6th had gotten so bad that they decided we're not going to do this. We're going to have to evacuate. And this realization kind of hit not just the Howes, but all the loyalists.
I'll bet, because now they're stuck.
So Lucy Knox's family, they removed themselves to England,
Oh, did they go to England?
Yeah, all these folks. And he continued, her father continued to do his job, right, as the Secretary of the Province of Massachusetts in absentia.
And she never
know.
really connected. There was an attempt later on
Yeah, but
to connect with a sister or
didn't
something.
really connect with the family again.
Yeah,
Which is a real problem for her later in life, because once Henry dies, she outlives him by a long time. I want to say 18 years or
It was
something.
a long time.
And
But her story wasn't unusual.
no, it certainly wasn't.
with
Because if
all
you
kinds of
survive
families.
childbirth, which she did, her children didn't survive. This is the other tragedy, right? Most of the children she gave birth to did not survive into adulthood.
No, they didn't.
And so this helped to, and the early death of her husband, all this combined to create a real
hard life.
depression for her. And that was witnessed by people in what we would call Maine, but was then Massachusetts where she lived. And so she was seen as a very, pitiful is too strong a word, but people did.
She was sad.
They were concerned
She was
about
sad.
her quite a bit. And she remained in mourning clothes, which was a very public display of the loss of a husband or an important family member, father, et cetera. And she remained in mourning clothes for years and years and years after Henry's death. But so the loyalists have to make a decision here, right? And about maybe 1,000 of them or so leave. And then the folks, when they come into the city, there's a celebration. It's still a big deal in South Boston. Of course, it happens to also be St. Patrick's Day. So in the 20th century and 21st century, it's become this massive.
I
massive
don't want to
deal.
be there.
No, although interestingly, this year they had the St. Patrick's Day parade on Sunday. What would that have been? The 15th. And then they did the Evacuation Day celebration on Tuesday the 17th. So it worked out in that sense. But again, most of the Tories or loyalists, decide they're leaving, and their haste to depart creates all kinds of chaos. And the British military leave about 250 more artillery pieces behind. So they've got. The Americans come up with all kinds of things as a result, and I think it's a really interesting story in that they don't have to actually destroy the city to capture it, but it's the beginning of the end of Massachusetts as the center of the revolution, and that's why one of the things we've been talking about is how. Yeah, we're going to come back to Westfield when they play a role in parts of the revolution, but we encourage people you can get in touch with me and ask me questions you have about the revolution. But Massachusetts, once the evacuation takes place, our role is in the politics in a large measure, and then in the fighting that occurs in places like Bennington and Vermont and Saratoga, and then in the aftermath of Saratoga in the next year. But we're kind of not involved in a lot of the directly, I should say.
Other than raising the men sometimes when they requested more men and sending some supplies if we could. But no, I get what you're saying. That's good information.
I will say in 2029, I'm happy to tell the story of one of the worst failures of the Massachusetts military when they lose a battle to the British in what we would now call Maine. On the Penobscot River, and it results in the court-martialing of Paul Revere, and that's not a 250th event that we really want to celebrate, but it's a
good story.
It's a good story.
We don't have to celebrate.
Yeah.
We can still share.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you. I could just sit back and say nothing.
Now I'm going to ask because I don't. I mean, I have one other detail to give you, but are there things you wanted to ask that?
No, Peter, how are we on time?
I think we're just
you're coming right up on it.
right.
Okay.
Right.
What do you have any last thoughts? My only last thought is May 3rd, walking through history with Westfield women. Dr. Ayada, do you have any last thoughts that you want to share?
Well, I echo your encouragement to see not only 42nd Street this weekend, but go see the following weekend. Go see our wonderful story of Westfield women. My closing thing on Knox on this issue is, I guess, something that people always tend to ask. well, this is expensive, right? I mean, you got to move, you got to pay the Teamsters, you got to do all that. He did present a bill to General Washington. He said, look, here it is, 520 pounds, 15 shillings, 8 3/4 pence.
And 3/4.
And 3/4. It comes to, 74,700 pounds today, just to roughly. It's a different counting system and so on, but that's roughly what we're talking about when we adjust for inflation. So about $101,000 is what he billed the General Washington for, what he put out to get this going. And we've talked about this before. He was not great with money, but this one he kept pretty careful accounting on. So
Did he get paid?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It took a while, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I thank you very much. We will look forward to having more information. I hope we can finally put Knox to bed for now, and at least this part of the Knox story.
Yeah.
At least this part.
He plays a role in other,
He does.
battles and so on.
He does, and that's interesting because, again, in history, I don't know that people are aware of where he went after this. He didn't just disappear, folks. He kept participating.
No, in fact, his other big important thing in 1776, we will celebrate the 250th anniversary of this Christmas because he's instrumental in the victory at Trenton. Yeah.
Really? Good to know. Well, maybe we'll visit that the next time. All right, Peter, thank you very much, folks. We thank Peter. We thank Dr. Ayeta. Why am I doing this today?
You're fine.
No.
Aida.
Nick.
There you go.
Thank Nick
Yep.
for being here again, and we'll see you again. Thank you.
Thanks.